The broadcast of the regular meeting of the Minneapolis Business Inspections and Zoning Committee will now begin.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Business Inspections and Zoning Committee for June 16th, 2020. My name is Jeremy Schrader, and I'm the Vice Chair of this committee, and I will be chairing today's meeting. As we begin, I will note for the record that this meeting has remote participation by members of the City Council and City staff as authorized under Minnesota Statutes Sections 13D.021 due to the declared local public health emergency. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify a quorum for this meeting.
Councilmember Reich?
Present.
Gordon?
Here.
Fletcher?
Here.
Ellison?
Present.
Goodman?
Present.
Chair Schrader?
Here. Thank you. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Today's agenda is before us. We'll first dispense with the consent agenda, which is items numbers 8 through 12 on the agenda. Item number 8 is the liquor license approvals, and number 9 is the gambling license renewals. Item 10 is a grant from Maddie's Fund for Animal Care and Control Foster Program. Item number 11 is a grant from the Rachel Ray Foundation to help alleviate animal welfare financial challenges associated with the coronavirus pandemic. And item number 12 is authorizing changes to the standard facilities use permit to allow a mobile United States Postal Service unit at 30 West Lake Street. Are there any comments on the consent agenda, or would anyone like to pull anything off for discussion? All right, not seeing anything, I will move approval of the consent agenda and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Reich?
Aye.
Gordon?
Aye. Aye.
Fletcher?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Goodman?
Aye.
Chair Schrader?
Aye.
There's 6 ayes.
Thank you. That carries, and the consent agenda is approved. Next, we'll proceed to the bulk of our agenda. Item number 1 is an appeal submitted by James Archer regarding the decision of the Heritage Preservation Commission to deny the demolition of a historic resource application for the property located at 2309 Plymouth Avenue North. This item is continued from our last meeting, and I'll ask staff to give a brief presentation.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Sheila Vemmer, and I'm a senior city planner with the Historic Preservation Team in CPED. Today, I'm presenting an appeal application submitted by James Archer, the applicant and appellant, of the May 5th, 2020 Heritage Preservation Commission's denial of demolition of a historic resource application for 2309 Plymouth Avenue North in the Willard Hay neighborhood. Next slide, please. This building was constructed in 1910 and was occupied by 3 congregations: the Homewood Presbyterian Church starting in 1910, the Knesset Israel congregation in 1948, and the New Salem Missionary Baptist Church in 1972 until 2006. The building is currently vacant. Next slide, please. The former church may also be one of the last remaining buildings standing after the Plymouth Avenue riots of 1967, a pivotal event in civil rights history in Minneapolis. It is important to note that the apparent center of this event of civil unrest was just 3 blocks east of this former church. Staff recommended the former church as potentially eligible under 2 local significance criteria: 1, significant events, and 3, neighborhood identity. The architectural integrity and material integrity of the church is fair. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing to demolish the building and construct a 4-story, 36-unit apartment building with 50% AMI affordability. The owner also purchased the vacant lot across the alley to the west and is proposing a 4-story, 27-unit building. 13 of the units will be set aside for housing support through Hennepin County for people experiencing chronic homelessness. On May 25th, next slide. I think that's the last one. On May 25th, the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission adopted staff recommendations and voted to deny the demolition, establish interim protection, and direct staff to prepare or cause to be prepared a designation study for the 2309 Plymouth Avenue North as a potential historic landmark. The appellant is present and plans to speak. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? All right, not seeing any. I'm going to proceed to open the hearing. With this type of hearing, we'll give the appellant, applicant, the opportunity to make their case first. Is James Archer or a representative of the applicant on the line? And you might need to press *6 to speak.
Yes, James Archer is here.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm James Archer, and I live at 1015 Queen Avenue North, and I'm the owner of the property at 2309 Plymouth Avenue North. I live a block and a half down the street from the site, 2309 Plymouth, and I've lived here since 2008. This building has been vacant for the better part of 12 years. I've watched this blighted building fall deeper into ruin. When I bought it, I initially looked to reuse the existing structure, but found out it wasn't feasible to save the building, given the degraded condition. I've always wanted to give back to the community, and I know there's an affordable housing shortage within the city of Minneapolis. After I bought the building, I hired Pete Keeley from Collage Architects to help design small-scale affordable housing on Plymouth Avenue. Plymouth Avenue has been highlighted in the 2040 plan as a transitway, an appropriate site for affordable housing development. There has already been a lot of public investment on Plymouth Avenue and these cross streets. The next block to the east is Estes Funeral Home, completed in 2019. Across the street from this building is the Regional Acceleration Center, with Hennepin County offices, completed in 2019. And behind that is the U of M UROC building. Across the street from there is the Urban League, built in 2001, with community spaces and employment assistance. Also in the process of construction is North Pointe Health and Wellness, right on Plymouth Avenue, across the street from the building I own. Over the years, I've seen and heard of many failed attempts to rebuild the existing structure prior to me owning it. I felt that this was a good opportunity to develop new, high-quality, deeply affordable housing in my community. My development would have 49 units at 50% AMI and another 13 units at 30% AMI, serving high-priority homeless and individuals in need of supportive housing. Simpson Housing Services will be the service provider for those units. I was surprised to see that the neighborhood group NERC supported the designation of this building after vigorously opposing designation of the Homewood neighborhood just a couple of years ago. Along with that, NERC previously owned the building 2309 Plymouth Avenue, which I now own, from the year 2000 to 2008, in which they apparently were unable to fund or find an alternative use for. When I pulled the demolition permit in January of this year, that's when I learned that the city considered the building potentially historic, and I would have to ask permission from for demolition from the HPC. I hired a historic consultant, Amy Lucas of Landscape Research, to evaluate the property for the HPC hearing. As part of my new construction development, I'm planning on adding a component that would document the history of the neighborhood and Plymouth Avenue. This would be in the form of plaques or pictures installed in the interior or exterior of the building, discussing the history. Along with that, I would also like to add art components that would also speak to the history and relate to Plymouth Avenue. On my team today, I have Amy Lucas, a historic consultant with Landscape Research, to add some comments in terms of the historical significance of the building. So I'll let her take it from here.
Hi, I'm Amy Lucas with Landscape Research, and I assisted James with the historic evaluation. This area has been surveyed multiple times through the years. In 1997, the city completed the historic context on Jewish settlement in Minneapolis, and the report recommended related buildings for designation. This church was not one of them, but 4 synagogues and a cemetery were designated as a result. In 2002, the North Minneapolis Historic Resources Inventory was completed and did not recommend this building for individual listing. And as James noted, in 2017, the city pursued designation of the Homewood Historic District. The district was significant as a Jewish residential community. This church was not built as a synagogue. The designation lacked neighborhood support and was not designated. There is a lengthy history of this building in James' submittal to the HPC. And as Sheila noted, Homewood Presbyterian Church was built in 1910 for a predominantly white congregation. In 1948, Knesset Israel left their building on Lyndale and moved into the Plymouth building. They left in 1972 when New Salem Missionary Baptist Church moved into the building and left in 2006. This church reflects the changing community, as all churches do throughout Minneapolis. To avoid governments validating religious groups, churches are not designated solely based on their congregations or religious affiliation. So the city staff wrote that the church met 2 criteria for designation. The first one, criteria number 1, as a former church for its association with important events, but it's unclear what important events this church is related to. The staff report does discuss the downtown Minneapolis and Plymouth Avenue race riots of July 1967. The race riots did not take place in or near this church, and the 3 congregations in this building have never claimed any association with the 1967 race riot. This building is not a physical marker of the civil rights movement in Minneapolis, and the synagogue was still located here in 1967. Staff notes that Plymouth Avenue has been redeveloped, and this building is one of the older buildings remaining on Plymouth Avenue. Luck and age are not reasons for designating and have no business for listing. It's a slippery slope if you start to designate the oldest building on the street, because Lyndale and Hennepin are long streets. The staff report also claims that the property meets designation criteria number 3 because it is associated with distinctive elements of the city or neighborhood identity. City or neighborhood identity are commonly misused criteria by the city staff. This type of designation is actually rare. It's Space Needle for Seattle, the Eiffel Tower for Paris. The Grainbelt Brewery sign meets this criteria. Staff never explains what neighborhood identity this building meets, but there's discussion of the 1967 race riot and urban renewal as elements of North Minneapolis identity to be preserved. Urban renewal is not a distinctive element of Minneapolis or North Minneapolis identity and is not related, this building isn't related to that movement. This church is not connected to a race riot, and it was not built during the urban renewal program. Finally, the HBC actually did not make findings that this church met the criteria for local designation. Instead, they asked for more research. There is a lengthy amount of research in this report that we filed with the city and attached to the appeal. Further research is onerous and will not alter the conclusions that I found in this evaluation. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Not seeing any. I will now open the hearing to any other members of the public who would like to speak on this issue, and ask the clerk if there are any additional speakers in queue for this item.
No additional speakers on item 1.
All right. With no additional speakers, I will now close the hearing and see if there's any discussion among my colleagues. Councilmember Gordon.
Well, and I'm happy to yield to Councilmember Ellison too. I was just curious if staff could tell us how long they thought it would take to complete a study to make a final recommendation or determination.
Hi, we're usually given a year because it's not the only project we're dedicated to. So I believe this one, because most of the history behind this church and behind the civil rights movement that happened is going to be oral history, and it's going to take a lot of reaching out to community members and speaking to them and researching the already recorded oral histories. This is a different type of preservation community outreach effort. There's not a lot written and not a lot of academic research already behind this. So this would be something we'd have to conduct on our own. With COVID-19, it's thwarted our approach so far, but we've already reached out and found many people willing to speak up about their memories of the church and the riot that occurred 3 blocks away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you. So I would like to grant the appeal to James Archer and direct staff to draft findings. And I know that I've been having these conversations and working with staff, so I can actually list out the findings if that's needed. Is there an attorney on the call who could tell me if that's needed?
Mr. Chair and committee members, this is Joel Fussy from the City Attorney's Office. You could certainly speak to any of the findings that you wish to include. However, that definitely is always a good thing. You also could simply direct staff to complete findings.
Okay, I'll list them out just so everybody kind of knows my thinking along these lines. So, you know, I'd say 1, the arguments for potential significance under criterion 1 and criterion 3 is not strong enough to merit a designation study. The property is not associated with significant events nor with distinctive elements of the city, of the neighborhood identity. 2, the historic integrity of the building is diminished. And 3, there are no reasonable alternatives to demolition due to the fact that the needed rehabilitation work exceeds the economic value of the property. And I'll say that while I definitely understand the desire for us to sort of preserve buildings, I also think that we are in a housing crisis, and we are looking at a corridor and a part of the city that I think could benefit from a lot of this from housing. I will, however, would like to put a condition on the in granting the appeal for James Archer to work with city staff to create a mitigation plan that would include but not be limited to photographic documentation of the existing structure. So that was kind of a lot. I hope that's all captured verbally, but that is the motion I would like to make.
Thank you, Councilmember Ellison, and just kind of want to check back with staff to make sure that that is enough.
Mr. Chair and committee members, certainly we can conceptualize those findings and get them into the record appropriately.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion on this item? All right, not seeing any more discussion, I will ask the clerk to call the roll on Councilmember Ellison's motion to approve the appeal with the stated findings and stated conditions.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Chair Schrader.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
That motion passes, and we will now move on to the next item. Item number 2 and 3 on today's agendas are appeals of the Zoning Board of Adjustments decisions related to properties 525 10th Avenue Southeast and 4736 through 4740 Grand Avenue South, respectively. It was discovered last week that the required notices sent to nearby property owners regarding this hearing included an incorrect time for today's meeting. As a result, the staff has sent out corrected letters, and will continue these hearings on both of these meetings to our next regular meeting, currently scheduled for July 14th at 1:30 p.m. Before I make that motion, however, I want to formally open the hearing and check with the clerk in case there is anyone on the line to speak on this item who will be unable to return for our July 14th meeting. Has anyone signed up to speak on these items?
No speakers for items 2 or 3.
Thank you. Not seeing any speakers, I'll move to continue item number 2 and 3 to the meeting for July 14th. Is there any discussion? Not seeing any, I will now ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Chair Schrader.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
That motion passes, and those hearings are continued to July 14th. Next is items number 4 through 7 on our agenda, and they're regarding related appeals of the Planning Commission's actions on the projects on Lake Street between Garfield and Harriet Avenues. If there's no objection, well, we'll first handle the hearings related to item 4 and 6 jointly, and then we'll handle items number 5 and 7 jointly. So items number 4 and 6 are appeals regarding several decisions of the City Planning Commission to approve a new 7-story mixed-use building with 132 dwelling units and 1,700 square feet of commercial space at 510 West Lake Street, 2946 and 2948 Harriet Avenue South. We'll begin with the staff presentation.
Good afternoon, council members. Peter Crandall, Senior City Planner with CPED Land Use. As Vice Chair Schrader noted, we'll be looking at 2 projects today that are next to each other along West Lake Street. 2 similar projects completed in conjunction with another project across the street, across Harriet, that is currently under construction. The first project is located at 510 West Lake Street and 2946 and 2948 Harriet Avenue South. The site is currently occupied by a 1-story auto-oriented commercial use, which is vacant. Next slide. As I stated, this is a part of a multi-phase development project along West Lake Street by the same applicant. The project that we're looking at right now is a market rate development, and it's at the center of this image in between the other 2 proposed developments. Next slide. The applicant is proposing 1 level of underground parking between these 2 projects. So it's a shared underground parking garage that provides enclosed vehicle parking for residents of both buildings. Next slide. The applications before the Planning Commission on May 11th were a rezoning from the C2 Neighborhood Commercial District to the C3A Community Activity Center District, a conditional use permit to increase the maximum building height from 4 stories 56 feet to 7 stories 78 feet in the C3A district, a variance to increase the maximum floor area ratio from 3.375 to 4.91, a site plan review for a new mixed-use building with 95 dwelling units and 1,500 square feet of commercial space. The applications were all approved by the Planning Commission with some conditions of approval. One of those conditions of approval pertains specifically to the variance to maximum floor area ratio. I'm sorry, I think I misstated the number on that earlier between the 2 projects. The 510 application variance is from 3.375 to 5.2. A condition of approval was placed on that variance request that the applicant meet the standard for the mixed use density bonus, which would increase the maximum floor area ratio by 20% on top of the 20% bonus that the applicant is already getting for providing enclosed parking. They would still require a variance, but that would bring them closer to compliance with the maximum floor area ratio. It will require them to implement at least 50% of the gross floor area on the ground floor as commercial uses. Currently, as you can see on this proposed ground floor plan, the applicant is proposing 2 small retail spaces on the southwest corner of the site, but that does not meet the standard for 50% of gross floor area, which is all of the usable occupiable area on the ground floor, not including the proposed enclosed parking garage. The applicant is appealing that condition of approval as attached to the variance for FAR. We can go to the next slide. There is a second appeal of the decision of the Planning Commission to approve all of the applications related to the development, including the rezoning, conditional use permit, and variances and site plan review for the project. That applicant is a neighboring property owner. I won't go too far into detail as far as the other design elements and application conditions, but I can take questions from the commission related to those issues if there are any before we hear from the appellants.
Thank you, Peter. Are there any questions for staff? All right, not seeing any. Thank you very much. I will now open the hearing, and I'll first give Christine Martinson or her representative the opportunity to present their case. Is Ms. Martinson on the line? You might need to press *6.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, my name is Chris Martinson, and I'm appealing the decision of the Planning Committee to approve Plan 10545 and Plan 10543. And the basis of my appeal is that on the house, which is my property to the north of the building sites, was built in 1886, and the architects at that time built it to very much make use of solar gain through the windows. I've got 11 large windows on my south side, and the windows measure 2'4" by 6'4". They're very large for the access. And I apologize to the committee that I don't have an attachment to present to you. I just got my notice. I just saw my notice for this meeting this morning. And then also I saw the notice, but then there wasn't any specific instructions for how to access the meeting, and there was no specific instructions for, you know, turning in my attachments. So, but I do have a private zoning or shadow study that I commissioned with an architect. So I'm going to verbally communicate to you my my attachment or the evidence of what I want to present to you. So starting November 9th, I've got, like, it's a 2-story dwelling, and like I mentioned, the windows are 6 foot 4 inches tall. And starting November 9th, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., my whole first floor is completely shadowed by the buildings that are planned to be built, and that shadowing, that full shadowing, does not end until February 1st. The hours of the full shadowing are 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. It may be my architect didn't include phase 1 in the shadow study, and so this is just based on phase 2 and phase 3. But I'll probably have him do a separate one adding phase 1, because that would probably contribute to more shadowing. And then the complete, so that's 3 hours a day for 3 months, the whole first floor. And then starting November 20th to January 20th, for about the same amount of time during the day, the whole second floor windows are completely shadowed. So they're 100% shadowed for 2 full months for approximately 3 hours a day. And on sunny days during these hours, the solar gain I receive through my windows heats my house so greatly that I don't need to rely on any indoor heating system at all. It's absolutely amazing, the solar gain that I receive. On sunny days, I would be completely losing this for two full months, like I said, for the whole south side, and then half the amount for a full 3 months. And also I have 5 children, and the lack of access to sunlight would contribute to seasonal affective disorder for them. That is it would be very gloomy in our house during the winter with if the buildings are built, would be built to the height. It's an 80-foot height for the buildings. So thank you for hearing my appeal. I appreciate it.
Ms. Martin, thank you very much.
I wanted to mention that under state statute 473.859, because of the way my house was built and the way that that I consider my windows a solar energy system, and they definitely are.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Also, if you wouldn't mind checking your email, our staff just emailed and provided an email that you can send all of those documents in to make sure they're part of the public comment.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for bringing that up for us. Now we'll open the hearing to the project applicant, Lake Street Developers. Is there a representative here that could speak?
Yes, Stephen Min here on behalf of the applicant, and we also have attorney Carol Lansing appearing on our behalf.
Yes, this is Carol Lansing, Bakery, Drinker, Biddle and Reese.
Oh, thank you. Thank you both for joining us. And please proceed.
Yes, I would say just a couple of words in response to Ms. Martinson's appeal. I genuinely sympathize. I dodged a bullet a couple years ago when a new person bought the one-story house south of me and did not tear it down or build it up to the 2.5 stories that it could be and would block my son. So I understand the importance of that to our personal living spaces. However, the entire area between Lake Street and the Greenway, including Ms. Martinson's property, has been guided as Corridor 6. So the city's intent is that taller buildings will be built here. Although these buildings are 7 stories, they do comply with, they're less than the 84-foot height limit that is allowed for, intended 6-story development in this area.
Thank you. Mr. Min, do you have anything to contribute as well?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think we'll just leave Ms. Lansing's comments on the record. I'll just add, I'm not sure state statute can be interpreted the way Ms. Martinson would like it to be. A solar system, which we have on these buildings that we're building, are intended to comply with 473.859. State statute is way more specific than just windows that gain solar heat. But I'm also sympathetic to the issue that Ms. Martinson advanced, but we are in an urban corridor that's targeted for density and affordable housing, and that's what we're trying to respond to.
All right, thank you. I will now open the hearing to any other member of the public who would like to speak on these items. Again, this is for items number 4 and 6 on the agenda, which is 510 West Lake Street, as well as 2948 Harriet Avenue South. Madam Clerk, are there any additional speakers in line?
I believe Stephanie Brown has signed in for item 4 and 6.
Great. Is Ms. Brown on the line?
Yes, I am.
Oh, thank you for joining us. And if you wouldn't mind sharing your testimony.
Sure. Can I have a quick clarification around whether this is just around the neighbor appeal or also around the gone for condition? I want to speak to the appropriate item.
Sure, this is on the neighbor appeal, and please staff jump in because we are doing this a little differently if I have that wrong, and then we'll be speaking next to the applicants.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if
Yes.
I could just interrupt. My understanding is that we were taking both of those items concurrently and that we would hear from both appellants on items number 4 and 6. And then hear public testimony about the project in general. We can, I think, handle them one at a time. I'll leave that up to you, but we did not hear from the applicant team about their appeal on item number 4 yet.
I think we will let them, in that case, let's come back to their appeal on number 4 after hearing public testimony on this, unless I have any other objections from committee members. All right. Ms. Brown, does that serve as clarification?
Yes, so I will speak to the buildings overall right now, and I will speak later to the ground floor conditions The neighborhood, and I reattached this as I submitted the request to speak today, supported both buildings after 2 public hearings, significant door knocking around, and a community survey, and a Whittier Alliance board vote. In general, as we looked at these buildings, we do understand that this is a high traffic corridor, high traffic in terms of public transit as well, that greater density is called for, and we see and agree with the need for additional housing in the community, particularly affordable housing. And so we expressed in those letters unconditional approval for the affordable housing building and desire to see that built. And the other building, we also expressed support for conditional on the affordable housing building being built as well, as we wanted to see those as a parcel to provide a mix of housing types and price levels for the community. So I would request that the neighbor appeal be denied. Speaking as both a community resident, but also the chair of the Whittier Housing Issues Committee and a member of the Whittier Alliance Board.
Well, thank you. All right, wanted to one more check, Madam Clerk. Are there any additional speakers on the line?
No further speakers.
Okay, thank you. With no additional speakers, I will now close the hearing and see if there's any discussion among my colleagues. Not seeing any, I will move for denial of the appeal. And Clerk, would you mind clarifying what we are voting on, just so my colleagues know before we call a roll call vote?
I will clarify with you as well. So we're denying the appeal listed as item number 6.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right, Clerk, if you wouldn't mind taking the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Chair Schrader.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
That motion carries, and that appeal is denied. We'll now proceed to items number 5 and 7, and these are appeals regarding the several decisions of the Planning Commission to approve the new 7-story building. That was the mixed-use building with 95 developed dwelling units and 1,500 square feet of commercial space. I'll ask for a staff presentation on this part of it.
Mr. Chair, did we want to get to item number 4 that's related to the same project before moving on to the next one, or?
Actually, let's go there. I think we tried to do 4 and 6 at the same time, and that clearly did not work out. So why don't we go back to number 4?
Sure. And number 4, just to clarify, is the condition of approval attached to the variance application that requires additional commercial uses.
Thank you. If you wouldn't mind, just to clarify a little bit more, Peter, just on what, like, staff's recommendation on this?
Sure. So, yes, staff's original recommendation was to deny the application for variance of the FAR. The Planning Commission approved that application at their meeting on May 11th and attached a condition of approval to the variance that the applicant meet the standard for mixed uses on the ground floor in order to increase their maximum floor area ratio by 20%. That would require that they implement at least 50% of the gross floor area on the ground floor as commercial uses, which would be more than what they are proposing currently.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to check to see if any of my colleagues have any questions for staff. Not seeing any. I will call on the project applicant, Lake Street Developers, to talk a little bit more about this appeal.
Hi, this is
Mr.
Carol
Chairman.
Lansing again. Steve Min uploaded some slides for this, for our presentation. Are those up or can they be brought up?
Just want to check, does staff have those that presentation?
IT and staff doesn't have anything. If the applicant would like to email the city clerk's office, we can bring that up. You can email council comment at minneapolismn.gov.
Council comment at, I'm sorry, Irene, could you give the address again? Council comment
at minneapolismn.gov, or you can email irene.casper@minneapolismn.gov.
Yeah, let me do that. I did upload it with my sign-in request, but let me get that done while you're proceeding.
Yes,
Okay,
I can.
thanks.
This is Carol. I can proceed with my comments, which are coming first in our presentation while that happens. Our appeals on both projects, as Peter noted, request that the City Council remove the condition of approval for the FAR variance regarding the percentage of ground floor commercial uses. I'll note that, as Peter said, staff recommended denial of the FAR variance altogether when the Planning Commission during their discussions indicated that they intended to approve the FAR variance. Staff recommended this condition of approval, and it was after the public hearing was closed. And while we had a brief opportunity to address it, we really didn't have a discussion with the Planning Commission, and they didn't really discuss this condition. This condition creates similar problems for both projects, and the reasons supporting our request are the same for both appeals. So my remarks apply to both appeals and will be somewhat general in that respect. I'm going to speak about how the proposed FAR is consistent with the 2040 Plan Land Use and Built Form Guidance, and how the proposed FAR meets the criteria for a variance. And after my remarks, Steve will explain to you why compliance with the condition would be detrimental to the projects and the neighborhood. When you get them, slide 1 is an aerial that shows you 3 projects. These 2 projects before you today, although not part of a planned unit development, are the second and third proposed phases of a coordinated development project that's going to add substantial numbers of new market rate and particularly affordable housing units on the Lake Street Transit Corridor. The first phase of this coordinated development is currently under construction at 410 West Lake and is creating 111 affordable units. Phase 2 at 500 West Lake will create 132 market rate units, and phase 3 at 550 West Lake will create another 95 affordable units. Slide 2 in our packet is really bullet points on consistency with the 2040 plan. Both projects promote multiple goals of the 2040 plan, in particular the goals for production of affordable and accessible housing, for creation of complete neighborhoods, and promoting construction of sustainable buildings to improve the city's climate change resilience. The projects are also consistent with the community mixed use future land use designation, and community mixed use calls for large scale mixed use development. That designation does require active non-residential uses at the street level, but the 2040 plan does not require that they constitute 50% or more of the ground floor area. The 2040 plan doesn't include any direction or guidance on the percentage of commercial area at all. But both of these projects do include retail spaces along the street, so both of them do comply with the guidance for inclusion of active non-residential use on the ground floor. Second, the height and consequently the proposed FAR of the projects comply with the guidance for large-scale development in the community mixed-use areas, as well as the Corridor 6 built form guidance. Both staff and the commission found that the project features justified increase in height to 7 stories because of furthering comp plan goals and policies. The 2040 plan doesn't include specific guidance regarding FAR limits, however. We believe it's reasonable to conclude that it does support higher FAR for buildings that are allowed increased height. And the purpose of allowing increased height over the quarter 6 guidance isn't just height for height's sake. It's to allow more floor area, to allow more density in terms of both area ratio and housing units. And that is the purpose of it. I'm sorry?
Oh, just sorry to interrupt you. Just wanted to jump in and let you know that your slides are up and they're currently on number 2. And if you have some direction for staff, if you want to go somewhere else, please let us know.
Okay, appreciate it. Going to say that the purpose of these particular requests for FAR variances are so that both projects can provide more housing, including more affordable housing than would be possible without the variance, and that this housing will be created in exactly the location where it's needed and appropriate in a transit-rich, walkable, bikeable, mixed-use, and diverse neighborhood. Slide 3. These are the proposed, now I'm speaking to why it's not just consistent with land use guidance, but it's also meets the required criteria for granting a variance. This slide shows the proposed findings that we presented to the Planning Commission, and the request for council action that you have in your materials, as well as our appeal statement, sets forth the findings adopted by the commission, and we concur in these findings. The commission agreed that because the zoning code has not yet been updated to align with the 2040 plan, that creates a practical difficulty in complying with city land use policies while restricted under current FAR limits. And I think it's important to note that staff has routinely recognized as a practical difficulty for an FAR variance that existing zoning limits, which prevent compliance with city land use policies, encouraging greater density, are a practical difficulty. The Planning Commission also found that the proposed height and the floor area density that comes with it are appropriate in this transit-oriented location. So unless you have questions for me now, Steve will talk to you next about the specific detrimental impacts of the condition of approval.
Thank you, Ms. Lansing. I'm not seeing any other questions from my colleagues. Mr. Menner, if you'd like to go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would. Members of the committee, thank you for hearing our appeal here today. I'm going to ask the IT staff to put up slide number 4, please. This is the ground floor plan for the phase 2 project. And as Mr. Crandall noted, the southwest corner of this project has 2 retail spaces, but also 2 bathrooms and some navigable corridor space. I also would like to call to your attention across the south facade, you will see there are 4 entrance doors on the street, not just for the retail, but to the right of the 2 retail spaces, our community room, our conference room, and some of our public spaces, we have purposely put an additional door. The purpose for that is that we intended in our original design that some of our community spaces, meaning community spaces for the residents, the community room and the spaces that the residents would use, would also be directly street accessible to our neighbors in the Whittier community. And that was a condition that we heard pretty loud and clear from the Whittier Alliance when we talked with them initially, and we've been talking with them for about 18 months about this project. Not only are we doing the 3 residential walkout townhomes that are on the Harriet frontage on the east side of the building, but we also wanted the public spaces that we have that are not retail to also be retail-like in their appearance, have eyes on the street, and have the appearance of activity in the building. And where did we get this idea? We got this from the Planning Commission Committee of the Whole itself. When we first met almost 2 years ago about this project, staff had raised the very point about the minimum requirements for this particular type of zoning. They raised the question of gross floor area, and it was no less than President Sam Rockwell himself who encouraged us in the Committee of the Whole that we did not have to hit some arbitrary number of retail to reach an alternate compliance. That space that looked, felt, and behaved like retail was also acceptable under the 2040 comp plan. And so we embraced that. And it was a surprise to us that staff has stuck to the older zoning code compliance requirement when they were accessible to us in terms of the height. And as Carol Lansing has mentioned, height really isn't just for height's sake. Height has to include FAR, and we believe the Planning Commission acted independently of the gross floor area requirement when they granted the additional density on the basis of affordable housing being developed as part of this development. I'd like to turn your attention, if I could please, to slide number 6. This is the same floor plan without the residential walkout units. These would be the walkout units that would have to go away in order to meet the staff requirement for additional retail in this building. Retail that we as developers do not want to provide, retail that would be additional to the 25,000 square feet of vacant retail space that's in the Lynn Lake trade area according to LoopNet, and retail that would potentially, and more likely than not, be vacant storefront for, based on my experience, 3 to 5 years, and then only maybe half leased up. I have many spaces where mixed use has been applied with the gross floor area. I have built as the staff has suggested, and I have suffered retail vacancies of 30 and 40% in these projects in areas where there is already sufficient retail to serve the trade area. We don't think it's a good trade-off to lose these residential walkout units, which mirror our phase 1 building across Harriet, in favor of retail, which would be on a side street or potentially in addition to the retail on the south, and have to move our common areas inboard along Harriet at the expense of the common area spaces that we were giving to the community. We don't think that's a good trade-off. And we don't think that the zoning code's intent is to hit an arbitrary number. It's to have intent to have eyes on the street. So I would be happy to take questions about this approach, but on slide 4, we gave you the actual calculations of the retail plus the publicly accessible space, which when you add them together well exceed the threshold requirement that the staff believes is the 50% gross floor area requirement. It's around 5,000. We would be over that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Min. Just want to see if there's any questions from my colleagues. Not seeing any. Thank you both for your presentation. I will next call on, give Christine Martinson a chance to speak if she's still on the line. You may need to hit *6.
Hello, I don't wish to speak on this appeal. I just wanted to speak on my appeal.
Okay, great. With this,
okay.
We've had a little confusion just because we've got competing appeals and just want to make sure that all voices are heard. So appreciate you staying on the line. I'll now open the hearing to any members of the public who would like to speak on these items, and I'll ask the clerk if there are any additional speakers in line.
No other speakers for item 4.
Actually, sorry,
Ms.
can
Brown?
you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Me again on both 4 and 5.
And if you could say your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, this is Stephanie Brown. I'm at 302 East 26th Street.
Thank you.
And again, chair of the Whittier Housing Issues Committee and member of the board. So wanted to speak to each of these items in turn. Item 4 regarding 510 West Lake Street, which is a market rate 132 dwelling units. We as a neighborhood had conversations that requested the walk-up units that are in the project and also requested additional retail space, making this, I think, an interesting question for us. And so what we would ask is that if the condition moves forward, that staff and the appellant work together to see about relocating even those community access spaces, given that they're in the other building, rather than the walk-up units in order to create the condition. On item 5, regarding the affordable development at 514 and on, West Lake Street. Again, I would reiterate that our community position was unconditional approval, and that we have been consistent in that affordable housing is the primary goal in the Whittier neighborhood at this point. And so a trade-off that would cost affordable units on the second floor to relocate does not feel a reasonable trade. And so on item 5 in particular, I would request that the appeal be granted and the condition be removed. Happy to answer any questions if there are.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Just to be very clear, what you're saying from the Whittier Alliance and their voting, because we heard from Lake Street developers that they felt with the condition of approval put on by the Planning Commission that they would not be able to continue to do the affordable and how it impacts on their development. Are you saying that you would be supporting kind of their position to make sure the development goes through, or if you could kind of elaborate on that a little bit more, please?
So on item 5, which is the affordable housing development, yes, we would support their position. I will say in terms of public vote, for full transparency, the notification of this meeting, our public meeting is tonight. And so I have had conversations with Lynn Lake business owners, with Whittier Alliance board members, and sent a short survey to the Housing Issues Committee and received about 10 responses. But we have not held a public vote on the appeal or had the opportunity. However, supporting the appeal to remove the condition on item 5 would be consistent with all of the community conversations and public meetings, that it's unconditional given the affordability and given the bonus they receive for affordable housing in that development. In item 4, the market rate building, I think that answer is not as clean from the community's perspective, because we have consistently requested and did on this project increased retail. We also did request and communicated in our letter that we wanted walk-up units, particularly in comparison with just an apartment wall. And so if, as item 4 goes through, as it goes through, I would say the neighborhood consensus, as best as I can distill those conversations, is to say that we would like to work with a plan that potentially added additional retail, but not at the cost of the walk-up unit, even if that comes at the cost of publicly accessible amenity space, the club room and the business center. If those went to the second floor and we retained the walk-up and added additional retail, that would be consistent with neighborhood conversations. Does that clarify?
It does. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Just want to check if my colleagues have any questions for you. Not seeing any. I'd like to actually go back to the developer, if Mr. Mann, if you wouldn't mind responding to that with talking about the market rate building and kind of some of the changes that about to the walk-up units and how that would kind of affect the retail.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for the opportunity to rebut. In fairness, Ms. Brown and I have been emailing back and forth with each other for the last couple of days to try to get clarity. And I told her this morning, and I'll confess to the committee, I would not be doing these walkout units. I'm currently building them in phase 1, which is under construction, and I would not do these walkout units in phase 2 if it were not for the Whittier Alliance asking for these to be present in our design. I just don't do walkout units generally. They're difficult to lease. Women don't like them for safety issues. They tend to be long and dark, and they're complicated to operate. And so I wouldn't be doing them without the Whittier Alliance asking us to do them. So swapping out the space for additional retail, it's a little late in the game for us to embrace it. But I would say this, and I just want to put it in perspective. More retail for us would not be likely local retail. I think the value of what we're offering here is that we'll get small local retail in these small retail spaces. Large retail tends to collect national retailers and more franchised operations, food uses. We're really hoping to have small local uses here, and in particular with the phase 3 building, which we're not talking about right now, it presents some financing problems. But in the instant case, I've committed to and built structure around residential units. To convert them to residential would be a considerable undertaking in the change of structure in housing and how the upper floors are constructed. And I would prefer not to do it. It would really alter my construction plan considerably, and to lose units on the second floor to move all the amenities to the second floor. I'm unaware of any apartment building where you have to go to the second floor to get to the lobby and the amenities, except the very, very high end. And we're not trying to be that. And loss of residential units on the upper floor, in addition to loss of these units, is going to impair my pro forma, which is going to impair my ability to do the affordable units in phase 3. So I appreciate Ms. Brown wanting to split the baby in half, but we're either going to have a baby or we're not. That's sort of how I approach it.
All right, thank you. Want to check with the clerk to see if there are any additional speakers in line?
No other speakers on item 4.
All right, with no additional speakers, I will now close the hearing and see if my colleagues have any questions or additional comments. And just to clarify, just because we've been a little on different things, this is for the appeal, the applicant's appeal on 510 West Lake Street. And it is just the condition of modifying the ground floor to meet the minimum requirements, for the mixed use density bonus provided at least 50% gross area on the commercial space. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to move to grant the applicant's appeal. And I can speak to it if you'd like. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, please. I'm on mute.
Okay. It's pretty simple. We want this affordable housing to be built. There is good collaboration between this particular applicant and the neighborhood, and there are legitimate reasons why the public spaces are not going to be retail, but they're still public spaces. I would guess that given that there are doors leading to the outside, which I would love to see more of that on Nicollet Mall as an example, they could be converted to retail should the owner have retailers knocking down their door. But given where we're at with the pandemic, that there is a lack of investment in the city due to a lack of capital in the markets, I would think that we would want to see this happen. And in addition to that, I think we should be focusing our efforts as it pertains to retail on making sure that the small minority-owned businesses that had such trauma during the events of the past 3 weeks succeed before we add more retail to the mix. So I think the compilation of the pandemic, what has happened on Lake Street, even in this location throughout the past couple of weeks, as well as the incredible need we have for affordable housing, make sense that we should move forward with granting this particular applicant's appeal.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. See if my colleagues have any other discussions on Councilmember Goodman's. Also, I'd like to, Councilmember Goodman, I'm assuming that you'd also direct staff to need some findings. I didn't know if you want to share them here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my comments were pretty clear about what some of the findings would be, and I'd ask the city attorney and staff to provide the remainder.
Thank you. Not seeing any other comments from my colleagues, I will weigh in. And Planning Commission, I approved adding this condition. I think it's critical that we have commercial as well as amenities for buildings that are not just the residents that are going to live there, but for the bigger community. I do appreciate the developer working with the neighborhood association and with neighbors to really find out what will work there. I think that overall they've kind of come to a conclusion. I'll be supporting Councilmember Goodman's motion today. For the stated reasons that it really puts into place more retail, more amenities for other folks that live there, while still being able to have a workable project that brings affordable housing overall. I'll do one final call for my colleagues to see if they have any other comments. Otherwise, I will ask the clerk to call the roll on Councilmember's motion.
Councilmember Reich?
Aye.
Gordon?
Aye.
Fletcher?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Goodman?
Aye.
Chair Schrader?
Aye.
There's 6 ayes.
That motion passes. And now we will move on to Item number 5, originally we were trying to, because these are competing appeals between number 5 as number 7, we were taking them at one time. I would like to go back to that unless I have any objection from staff or from other colleagues on this committee. Not seeing any, I will first start with the kind of staff presentation, and if you can kind of just talk to the specific parts to this appeal and this the appeals of the 2 appeals of 5 and 7.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be brief here because the issues that we're dealing with are basically identical to the project that was just considered. This project is directly to the west of the project that we just looked at and is located at 516 and 520 West Lake Street and 2949 Garfield Avenue South. The applicant is proposing to construct a new 7-story mixed-use building with 95 dwelling units and approximately 1,500 square feet of commercial space on the property. The applications are very similar to the previous project, including a rezoning from C2 to C3A, conditional use permit to increase the maximum height from 4 stories to 7 stories, a variance of the floor area ratio from 4.02 to 4.91, and site plan review for the new structure. This application also requires an alley vacation that will be considered by this committee at a later date for that underground parking garage. Similarly to the previous project, staff had recommended denial of the variance to the FAR and site plan review, and the Planning Commission ultimately approved all the applications and attached the same condition to the variance to the floor area ratio for mixed uses on the ground floor. The applicant is appealing that condition, and similarly, Ms. Martinson has filed an appeal of the approval of all of the relevant applications for the new structure at this location as well. So I'll conclude there and I can take any questions.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have any questions for staff? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. I'll now open the hearing on items number 5 and 7. And again, I will just check to see if Lake Street developers have anything more to add on both of these. You might need to hit *6, and if you have nothing else to add, just let us know.
Mr. Chairman, this is Stephen Min speaking. I'll certainly defer to Ms. Martinson if she would like to go first.
Sure. Is Ms. Martinson still on the line?
Hello. My comments regarding phase 3 are the same for phase 2 because both buildings will greatly affect my property.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Min, would you like to add anything?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll be very brief. If you'll turn to, if your tech staff would put slide number 5 up, I think we can make quick work of this. This is the layout with the 2 retail spaces individually entranced on the southwest corner facing Garfield and the Lake Street corner. And again, we have the public space doors for both the common entrance of the building and the community room areas. It's the same scheme, but this is a much smaller footprinted building. I then want to turn your attention to plan sheet, our submittal slide number 7. This is the unfortunate outcome in this building because I just don't have the square footage. In order to increase the retail here, I would have to lose my entire community floor plan other than the retail to increase retail. And in order to move it to the 2nd floor, I would lose 7 affordable units. So I wanted you to see that. I think Ms. Brown spoke to it from Whittier Alliance. This is certainly not the outcome we were hoping for. So I just wanted to call that to your attention. And if you have other questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you very much. I just want to check if my colleagues have any questions. Not seeing any. I will now open the hearing to any other members of the public who want to speak on items number 5 or 7. And Ms. Clerk, I'll just ask if there are any speakers in line. I know we have had folks testifying for multiple ones, so if there's no one set up just specifically for this one, I might just leave the line open and see if people have anything to add.
I believe there's speakers are still on the line for 5 and 7. Miss Stephanie Brown had spoke previous, but you might want to reiterate your comments.
For clarity's sake, on item number 5, the appeal to remove the condition, we are supportive of that appeal in the interest of preserving as many affordable units as possible. On item number 7, the appeal to deny the conditional use permit and variance, we are not supportive of that appeal and would ask you to deny that appeal, believing that it is critical to add more affordable housing and more development to this high transit corridor. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Is there anyone else interested in speaking? All right, not seeing anyone. I will now close the public hearing and see if my colleagues have any questions or comments. Not seeing any. I will move to, yes? Sorry, a little hard over the technology to see if someone's trying to jump in, but I will go back to, I will move to approve the appeal in number 5 and deny the appeal in number 7. Would the clerk see if there's any discussion on that motion? Not seeing any. Could the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Wright?
Aye.
Gordon?
Aye.
Fletcher?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Goodman?
Aye.
Chair Schrader?
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
The ayes have it, and that those motions carry. And finally, item number 13 is the rezoning application submitted by Lake Street developers for the properties located at 510 West Lake Street, as well as 2946 and 2948 Harriet Avenue South, which is the project that has been dealt with in numerous items. I'll see if there is any additional comments for staff, and if not, that's all right, and we'll just kind of go back to the public hearing, but just wanted to see if there's anything staff wanted to highlight.
Nothing additional to add, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I will now open the public hearing and give the applicant a chance to speak on item number 13. No public hearing. Oh, excuse me. There's no public hearing on this item. So I will actually approve this item, and I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Wright?
Aye.
Gordon?
Aye.
Fletcher?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Goodman?
Aye.
Chair Schrader?
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries. And that concludes our business for today. And seeing no further business before us and with no objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.